I have a genuine question for my fellow game collectors out there, specifically those of you that like to collect for handheld consoles that are older than the Nintendo DS generation. My question is, how the hell do you guys do it? I've always struggled collecting and displaying Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games specifically. Obviously, this can apply to something like the Neo Geo Pocket Color, the Game Gear, or even the Lynx. So I wanted to ask, how do you guys like to do this? Because I'm about to enter my 8th iteration of trying to organize and display my handheld collection for games that don't really have end labels on them. And I'm struggling quite a bit. First things first, what I've done in the past. Now, obviously, like most people, just having a little Tupperware container that you just throw your games into, or a Ziploc bag. Problem is, you're not really displaying your games here, and that could lead to buying doubles, or it could also lead to not really knowing what you have and never really playing it, because if it's out of sight, it's going to be out of mind. So eventually at one point, I decided to thumbtack/clothespin up some of those baseball card binder holders. It looks like shit. This is not what I would recommend doing, and I will never do this again. But this is the very first iteration I had to actually displaying my games. After this, I think when I moved, the first way I attempted to do it was I started making little game holders out of recycled audio cassette boxes. And what I would do is I would just sort of shove the Game Boy Advance games directly in between the two pegs, or I would snap off one of the pegs and I would just shove the Game Boy or Game Boy Color game into there. And it looks good, it does work, but it required upkeep, and that was the biggest thing, is that every time I picked up a new Game Boy or Game Boy Color or Game Boy Advance game, I had to go to CVS and I had to print out a new cover, and that's providing one even existed. Most of the time I would have to design a new cover entirely by myself, which I don't mind doing every once in a while. I like graphic design. I did go to school for it. But when you're doing them in bulk and you have to do a ton at once, if you buy a lot, it does kind of, it gets grating, and you don't really want to do that over and over again. So because I didn't want something that necessarily required that much upkeep, my next solution was I bought one of those acrylic nail polish holders that they have at stores that hold the little nail polish bottles. And that looked really good for Game Boy Color and Game Boy games. Game Boy Advance games don't quite work with these because they're a little too short, so you have to put them up on their side. And it looks awkward as fuck, dude. I don't know why I thought this looked presentable for photos and stuff like that. It just doesn't look that good. I mean, mind you, does it look better than the games being in a Tupperware bin or being in a plastic bag somewhere? Yes, they're actually viewable here. You can see what your collection actually has. But they're not that much better looking, honestly. Them being just propped up on their side awkwardly is not the play. So after this is when I bought my first 3D printer, and what I started doing is 3D printing little Game Boy stands, and they had little hole slots for you to put the cartridges in. And that is what I'm currently rocking right now. As you can see, they're on my shelf. I've been rocking with these for the last couple of years, but again, this requires a lot of upkeep, because if I buy just one too many cartridges, I have to 3D print an entire new thing that's going to have 2 empty slots. So it's a hybrid of the effort required for the cassettes and also the presentation of the acrylic nail polish ones. So back to square one here. This doesn't quite work either. So I'm starting to run out of ideas. What do you guys do? Now, over the years, I've seen people put them in little sort of binder situations, which is kind of cool. Put them in the little baseball card things, but instead of stapling them to your wall like a fucking lunatic, you actually put them in the actual binders they're meant to be put in. I like that. I've also seen a lot of people get those custom game cases for them. Those are cool, and I would love to do that. The problem is you need a lot of fucking space, because you're taking a very small cartridge and essentially forcing it into a Nintendo DS box form factor. You're taking a cartridge that's under 3 inches in size, and you're turning it into something that's half the size of a DVD case. So it's cool. I like this, and if you have the space for it, I do recommend this. As a matter of fact, I've actually bought from custom game cases before my Virtual Boy cases for my very few physical Virtual Boy games I own. These all came from custom game cases, and they look fantastic, genuinely. High quality prints, the plastic feels great. they're really nice and they're good aftermarket shells. Like I said, the thing is you need the space for it. And I don't have a huge Game Boy collection, but it's big enough to the point where it would turn into a problem if I were to buy custom game cases for all of these games, because I would need a lot of space to put them. So I'm trying another 3D print. This one I just stumbled across and it's really fucking cool. It makes it look like one of those old DMG store displays. Now there's a lot of parts and pieces that go to this, including some electronics. So I don't know if I'm actually going to successfully be able to print this. If I do, I will update the video and show it off. But this is probably the closest I'm going to get to something that looks visually appealing and checks off the boxes of both displays the games as well as stores them in a not gigantic form factor that I can comfortably have in my game room without making concessions and removing something else to make room for it, you know? Anyway, if you collect games, please let me know what you guys do for your portable consoles. Send a comment or hit me up on social. I would love to see. This has been Dan Rock. I'll see you guys later.